Okay, so I think we are live. Welcome to the Drumming Career Podcast number 5. Can't believe this is number 5. I've never been more committed to anything in my life. But I'm having a good time doing these. It's really easy. All I do is just pick great guests and I shut up and let them talk. And I have another phenomenal guest today. Also, to get caught up, you can hear this stuff on Spotify. You can also go to joegoretti.com/podcast, but you're going to want to wait a little bit before you do that. My guest this week is not a drummer, although she can lay down a pretty mean pocket when she gets on the drums. She is a phenomenal singer-songwriter who also plays keys and guitar. She has played with some of the biggest names in drumming. She's had an incredible career as a solo artist, as well as performing with some of the hugest names in the music business. She was on tour singing with duets with Michael Bolton when the pandemic hit. She has a brand new single called Down With Me, my good friend, Chrissi Poland.
Oh,
Yeah, Chrissi.
Hey, what's up, homie?
There you are. What's shaking?
You know, living the dream.
Living the dream. All right. Well, It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, my friend.
Yeah. So where are you coming at us from today?
So I am in a little seaside town in New England where we are holed up doing a lot of home studio work and doing some online teaching, writing commercial stuff. We are hustling our original music and just trying to keep it all afloat as we go here.
And when you say we, you're referring to yourself as well as?
And my roommate, Ari, who's my husband.
Well, that's good.
Ari Hest, the phenomenal, the wonderful, the amazing. Can't say enough good things.
Ari Hest. Yes.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
I used to get him. So check it out. Before I knew who he was, we met on a tour and I had heard of him, but I used to get him confused with Ari Honig.
Oh, really?
Drummer. I'm like, wait, is Hest the drummer or is Honig the drummer? I couldn't remember. It's a funny thing we still laugh about 10 years later.
It is. Well, as long as you don't get confused anymore.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Right? Awesome. So it's fun. I don't want to there's too many different paths I can take if we talk, because we've known each other for so long. So that could segue into talking about Ari and you and your project Bluebirds of Paradise and all kinds of other things. So I want to try to stay on point for the most part, to cram as much as we can in this next hour.
Sweet.
So normally I start back at the top, but today I want to stick with the present, because you have a pretty big day today, right? You have a new release that happened literally today. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, so the video for my new single came out today. It's on Vivo. You can find it through my YouTube channel. It's on all my social media pages. Video was done during this pandemic. So Brad Landers, who's an incredible choreographer and artist I've worked with for years, conceptualized it with me, and I recorded my stuff here. He recorded his stuff. He's located in P-Town right now. We had dancers working on stuff in New York, in Pennsylvania, and he edited everything together, and we made it work. So that came out today. The single came out last week, and it's been fun to kind of push that baby out into the world. And since I'm not on the road right now, I can put even more time and focus into it, which is kind of cool. I'm liking that.
Absolutely. So the single is called Down With Me, and it is unbelievably catchy. I told you, you sent me a preview of it a couple of weeks ago, and I literally heard it one time and was waking up like days later with like hearing this chorus just that I couldn't get out of my friggin' head. So
yes, that's what we want.
Yeah, you definitely have an earworm there. So
and the great Josh Dion played drums on it, who was on your podcast last week.
That's true. Thank you for, man, you're so like into the showbiz. So in with the segs and all. That's true. Josh Dion was on last week, and we talked about it in the little pre-show. I didn't mention it in our actual interview that he played on that, but he lays down a mean pocket as he always does. So before we talk about the session, let's talk about the song itself, because it's pretty relatable. The lyrics are very relatable to anybody who's doing any independent artists that are trying to do original music. So tell me a little bit about it. What's the song about?
Yeah. So, I mean, the chorus is, I feel like it's pretty universal. And, would you be down with me, DOWN, down with me? Okay, fine. That could mean anything. And that's kind of what I want it to be. It's like a party vibe. Cool. But the lyrics and the verses really are about, what you do, what I do, what anybody who's hustling original music or trying to be an entrepreneur really of any kind, whether you're as a musician, being a sideman, even an artist, as a painter, whatever, you're creating something, you're creating content that you have to fight and fight and fight above the white noise to get the public to hear. Okay, we all know that story as artists. So I wanted to juxtapose that struggle, really, that thing that's just like such a drag. You can feel so beaten down by it at times. It's such a roller coaster ride. To juxtapose that with kind of like a party song, fun track. The song is very fun and happy and bouncy and like all good sounding, which is kind of what we need to portray in order to kind of keep the ball rolling. But there's a line in the song where I say, all the tours and the dates, everybody's doing great, but we're all lying, and that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But what I mean by that is like, we put out a certain thing, but behind closed doors, you often feel like you're in this like dark place. Everybody's going through it in their own way. Whether we all talk about it with each other or not is another thing, but everybody has that side of it if you're going to do this kind of thing. So that's really what I was trying to get at with the song and the music.
Well, I think you definitely nailed it. I love the line about trying to get on a Spotify playlist or trying to get on a playlist. That's great.
I mean, it's true. That's like, you're like, because you want to see a return on your investment of your creative project too. I'm sure there's people that are, create solely for the love of creating, and I have to love it too in order to put the effort in, but I want to see a return on it. So then it's like, okay, well, that's where the side of the business comes in. Like, how do I market it? How do I, maximize this? And that's where, we can all be kind of banging our heads against the wall.
Do you ever wish that you were coming up like in the 70s?
Oh my God.
You didn't have to worry about this when they had like people that handled all this stuff for us?
Literally, we talk about this all the time. Ari and I talk about it all the time. Like, not only like coming up in the 70s as singer-songwriters, I think we both would have done well in that era because we have stuff in our repertoire that's very remnant of that, and that era resonates with us. But also, even into the, we missed the window of the major vocal singing jingle session stuff in New York, where like we still do a little of it. I mean, if we get 1 or 2 commercials a year, we're like, whoa, it's like the freaking Super Bowl win.
At least you're vocalists. I'm a drummer. I got like, we're obsolete,
Seriously, I totally know what you mean.
Singers that can do things, but we're, we can be programmed out of things.
It's really true. Like, 20 years ago, if you were a top, you're top drummer in New York, you're doing 5-6 sessions a day, making bank, making union, people were buying houses. Like you could be a millionaire if you were like one of those people in the inner circle. And the way that it's shifted now, with most things being buyout, and occasionally you'll get the SAG commercial, but it's so few and far between that you have to have like 50 moving pieces to kind of keep the boat afloat.
You've had a few of those, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. One of the last ones I had a couple of years ago is, do you remember this one? I did a vocal for Coles.
I do.
And
that was
ended
big.
up, it ended up on the air, and it was like, if we were able to do stuff like that, even 3, 4, maybe 5 times a year, like that, like covers your year.
Yeah.
And they're really rare now. And we have some friends, that are a bit older than us that were vocalists, back when that stuff was at the height. And they were like, you buy a house, you work hard for a couple of years, you buy a house with that money. Like, it's crazy. It's changed.
I used to hear that too. The same thing when getting into New York and hearing how, like, I just missed it by that much. I talked to some of the guys that were there, and it was like, 10 years ago, you could still jump on tours. You could still do the jingle thing. Had been dying for a little while, but it still there were remnants of it, but it was
Yeah.
really starting to dry up just in time for me to move to New York City.
But you and me, we're lucky because we are some of the few that still got big pop tours.
Yes.
And when we were there, like in the 2000s, and we were really in the thick of it, it was rare at that time. I still, to this day, I'm like, because there's a million people who, not a million, but there's always somebody who can do the gig just as well as you can do it, and to be the person that's there at the right time, the right moment, you have the right thing, and you get hired and you get that big gig. Like when you're out there playing in the Sydney Opera House, like you're traveling all over the world. It's like, oh my God, like this is not a usual thing. This is not what every one of our friends is being able to get. It's still, sometimes I'm like, did that really happen? Was that for real? I still can't believe it sometimes.
And both of us have had some crazy experiences with it all over the place with different artists, random artists that would. So
random.
Before I get into all the artists that you've worked with, you've also worked with some of the biggest names in drumming, like
I have
legendary, iconic drummers ever. I was thinking about this before, like you could probably pick any iconic singer that probably hasn't played with the amount of drummers that you've played, like the names that you've played with. Let me just, I made a list, and I'm sure I'm going to leave somebody off. We got Steve Gadd. I mean, do I even have to go on there? Right? I don't have to go on with the list. You played with Steve Gadd twice, as far as I know, maybe more. Dave Weckl, Steve Smith, Peter Erskine, Jojo Mayer, Virgil Donati, Thomas Lang, Chris Coleman, Sean Pelton, Brian Blade, Joel Rosenblatt. I know I'm missing a bunch of people, but those were just the ones that I had to get off the top of my head.
Simon Phillips was a blast.
Simon Phillips, Todd Zuckerman,
yeah.
Did you play with Carlock too? With Keith Carlock?
I don't know if I ever played a gig with him. So that was 1 year at the drum camp where I usually meet all these amazing drummers that I couldn't do because I was on tour, where Dion filled in for me playing keys and singing.
Right. Yeah.
And he did double drums with Carlock on Asia, and they slayed.
Oh, that had to be ridiculous.
Totally ridiculous. And I remember calling Keith for a gig of mine that you couldn't do at the bitter end. I don't know where you were, but you weren't around. You couldn't do it. And he was down, and we were going to do it. And then he got pulled away into something, Steely Dan land or something. And like, we couldn't. So no, but we've been in the hangs together and stuff, but I don't think I've ever done a gig with him.
Yeah. Well,
and Antonio Sanchez was a blast too. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, he is a monster. Some of the stuff.
Totally. Such a musician.
Film scoring and all that. Oh,
he's insane.
So, okay. Now you mentioned it, the Drum Fantasy Camp. That's kind of where the majority of these performances have taken place. Now, how many years have you done that now?
Oh my God. I've only missed 1 year, and I believe this would have been our 14th year.
Wow. I didn't know you did that.
I know. It's crazy. And then of course, with COVID, it's not happening. And Steve Orkin, who is the founder and the CEO of the whole thing, he's not sure yet if it's going to be able to happen for 2021. We're hoping it's going to. It was going to be held in LA, and I think it still remains to be seen. But that was very like pivotal, sort of life-changing, the way that all, I can tell you the story of how it all happened.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, well, how did it happen?
It's very right place, right time again, where it's like, that's why I'm such the philosophy, and you've seen this, we've seen this over and over in our careers. It just get out and show up. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know who you're going to talk to. You don't know what it's going to lead to. And I cannot tell you, more than not, the biggest opportunities and the best things I've ever done in my career are because I just was like, all right, I'll just show up and see what's up. And that's what ended up happening. So I used to go to the Cutting Room Jam all the time, which you know about.
Of course.
The one, not the Cutting Room where it is now, but the other one, the old location.
Yep.
to Richie Cannata's Monday
Cannata.
Night Jam, which we used to go to all the time.
Richie Cannata, the sax player of legendary sax player for Billy Joel, as well as the
Right.
Beach Boys and a million other people. Go on.
And I have to like sidebar that a little bit with, so I had heard that, so I grew up like a psycho nerd Billy Joel fan. I still am to this day. I'm like the nerdiest. And I had heard that Billy Joel's sax player, who played on all those records in the 70s, was running a jam. And this was like right after I'd moved to New York. I'm like, all right, I got to go find this. And I walk in and it's, can I swear?
Of course.
Okay, I almost did.
Yeah.
I caught myself. Okay. So I walk in, so Richie's up on the stage and fucking Liberty DeVito's on the drums. And now I'm like freaking out. I'm freaking out because these are like the homies that I obsessed over these records when I was a kid.
Hell
So
yeah.
it it spoke to the soundtrack of my childhood, whatever. So I go up and I sign up to sing. Nobody knows who I am. I sign up to sing. I said, I want to sing Tell Me Something Good. And whoever was signing up like kind of looked at me funny and was like, do you are you cool with that song? Do you know it? And I was like, bitch, please. Just give me the microphone. Did my thing. It was cool. They became cool with me right away. Liberty became cool with me right away. And I was like having one of those like my past meets my present moments that we've had a million times in our careers. And then they ended the night with scenes from an Italian restaurant. I'm like drunk and crying. It was amazing. Anyway, from that jam, because all the musicians would come out and hang out, a lot of people got to know who I was from seeing me because I would just show up there and sing anytime I could. So that's how I met Joel Rosenblatt. And Joel recommended me to Vinny Valentino, amazing guitar player, who is like my family, my brother now.
Vinny's great.
So great. Vinny is in Vital Information, Steve Smith's band. They're very close with each other. So Vinny and Joel were starting this Monday night gig at the
Smith Bar. Yeah,
right?
I remember.
The Smith Bar. What street was that on? Like 42nd and 8th.
Yeah.
Or something like just that. And it was like a wall of windows so you could see us. And they asked me to front the band, play keys and sing. Let's put a repertoire of songs together. And we just started showing up and playing this gig on Monday night.
Now you're playing, these guys are all like real fusion monsters too, right? And you're playing, you have to play keys with them?
Yes. And I'm like a meat and potatoes keys player. I'm not playing, Herbie Hancock level, not even close. So, what I'm bringing to the table is like the R&B and the soul stuff that I can just comp basic I play keyboards like rhythmically, I can't solo any of that stuff. So I just bring my repertoire to the table, and that's what they wanted. They wanted like an R&B soul night, few jazz things thrown in here and there, but easy for me to hack my chair, and they just did what they did. So we started doing that. It built up a vibe. It was cool. And then Steve Smith, who was very close with Steve Orkin, who's the guy that was creating this drum fantasy camp.
Right.
Steve Orkin said to Steve Smith, hey, I need a band for this drum camp I'm starting because we're going to have jam nights and performances. And Steve Smith said, oh, Vinny, my band member, just started this band with this group of people down at Smith Bar. The vibe is great. See if you can just go check it out. So Steve Smith came down with Steve Orkin. They checked us out one time, and that was it. Steve Orkin said, you're hired. Come and do the first drum fantasy camp, which was in New Jersey that year, and featured Dave Weckl. And that was the first time I met Dave. And that's a hysterical story too. So
yes,
tell me when you want me to keep going.
You have to tell that story. You have to.
I love this story. So fast forward, the first drum fantasy camp happens. Weckl is the featured drummer. It's great. It was at Seton Hall. And so the drummers who are teaching, they teach these classes during the day. And this had never happened before. This is brand new. Steve Orkin says there's going to be this jam night with the band. Whoever has signed up to, take the classes from the teachers can come up and get a turn to play with the band. So we had sent a list of songs that people could choose from. And my whole MO with that, I would front the band, and my whole MO is when you come up, just watch me, just watch me for cues. We'll just have a good time. We'll just play. It's going to be very chill, whatever. And Steve Orkin was like, Dave, come to the jam night, come see this band, come hang out. Dave was, no, I'm going to be burnt. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Okay. So he ended up he convinced Dave to come by just to see us. So before we started playing, Dave came backstage, introduced himself. Of course, I know who he was. I was excited to meet him. And Vinny, who knows him from Vital Information, the scene, whatever, said, you should come and sit in, come play one song with us. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, how cool would that be? Play a song with Dave Weckl. It'd be so great.
Right.
He was like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with it. What are we do? We're not rehearsing. Like, what are you talking about? So
I love
we
Dave.
go out. I know, I do too. So we go out and we start playing. We played some Tower of Power stuff, whatever. And Dave, I don't know, it sparked something in him. He was like,
Tower of Power. He freaks to Tower of Power. I know he.
Yeah. And he was like, okay. He was like, he could see that we were cool. And he's like, the next break, he was like, all right, I'll play one song with you guys. And so we're like, great, let's do Down to the Nightclub. And there's this section at the end where it like goes back and forth between like 7 and 4 for a minute. It's like very specific at the end.
Yeah.
And he sat down with us for like, I want to say it was no more than like 2 minutes max. He was like, let's talk through the ending. And we had this really fast, like, talk through all the hits and where everybody's playing the hits on the table and make sure everybody's on the same page. All right, go out, we do it. Nails it to the wall. It was so killer. He had so much fun. We had so much fun. Everyone was freaking out. It was such a great time. And he was hooked. He was in. He was like, this is cool. I'm hanging with the students. I like this band. He was having fun. It was just a great time. And he came every other night and hung out, watched the students. He, was playing percussion on the side of the stage, just hanging and having a good time.
Yeah.
And that was my first time really connecting with him, working with him. Then after that, he invited me to NAMM and I got to do the Yamaha Groove Night with him.
He did more than just invite you to NAMM, didn't he? Wasn't there a phone call that he made to Yamaha that was basically like,
you did
have to hire this girl to do
he said
with me,
yeah, because they had hired singers for the show, 2 of which I know who are fantastic, but he called them and he was like, I'm bringing my own singer. So I was like, wow, this is very cool. And I think we did a Shaka tune and a Tower tune, and it was a blast. It was amazing. It was a joy. It's always a joy to get to work with him. It's like, getting in the ring with Muhammad Ali. It's just like,
it's one of the best ever, of course.
It's just ridiculous. And
the
it
funny
was a blast.
thing was, to me at least, because I mean, Dave Weckl to any drummer is like hallowed ground, and you guys became kind of friends. And then at one point he came out, he was playing with Chick Corea at the Blue Note, right? And then he came to our show at the bitter end afterwards.
Totally.
What a bug out that was. I remember, like,
it was totally cool.
Weckl's there, and it was,
and he became cool with you. And didn't you guys work on some Yamaha stuff together?
We went out for drinks afterwards, after your
Right.
show next door, which was a trip, hanging out and having drinks with one of my, like, this drum god, and being able to talk to him and just try to not gush over him.
Yeah, I
but
know.
at the
It's so
same
hard.
time be like, dude, I have to take this opportunity to tell you, like, how
Of
much
course.
you mean to the world. And he just kept blowing it off all night. All right, you know how Dave is, we're all right. And then at one point, I think maybe we probably had our second or third drink, and then he gave me a big hug. Come here, bring it in, But
So
no,
great.
actually, the funny thing was, it was when I got the Moby gig.
Mhm.
And I didn't have an endorsement, and the Moby gig came last minute, and again, thanks to you, because you recommended me for that gig. But when I got the gig with Moby, I didn't have a drum endorsement, and had like a week or 2 weeks or something, and they're hard to get, and this and that, and I didn't have any connections, and this and that. And you were like, let me see if I can email Dave, or I'll email Dave about it and see if he can maybe get you a number at Yamaha. And I remember he BCC'd me on the email to Yamaha, which is absolutely hilarious. And it's just like, yeah, so this is this guy, Joe Goretti, who just got this gig with Moby. I have no idea who that is, but he's about to go on tour with him. Can you hook him up with something? And they did, like the next day I got, not even the next day. It was like an hour after he sent it, and they like hooked me up
So
with a
good.
contract with him
Oh
and
my God.
Sabian Cymbals. So I owe
That's
that
amazing.
to Dave Weckl and
Yeah.
to you. But that was a bug out, like getting this, I have no idea who Moby is, but he's going on tour, so give him an endorsement.
That's what I mean about your past meeting your present, like that you've had the same experience where it's like, all right, you grow up, you're reading 700 million Dave Weckl articles and Modern Drummer your whole life growing up. And then all of a sudden, he's emailing Yamaha on your behalf to get you a kit as you're about to go on tour with like an iconic pop star. It's like the past meeting the present. It's blows my mind when that stuff happens.
And well, even that alone, like when you're talking about the past meeting your present with, I remember being at Berkeley with you when the Grammy Awards were happening.
Oh my God, this is so crazy.
Moby was with Jill Scott and Blue Man
Group. Yeah.
And we were at Berkeley, like watching this performance. And then fast forward, what was it, like maybe 5-6 years or something? And then well, tell me about that, because I don't even know if I know that story. How the hell did you meet Moby? How did that start?
Again, it's this funny thing of like when I trace them back in my head, it's like, yep, just show up because that's what's going to change your life. Freaking cutting room jam again. So I can stem it all the way back to the cutting room jam. So I would go to that place, there would be a million people there. And the owner of the cutting room, Steve, remember Steve with the long hair? He was like the co-owner.
Yes, I do.
Him and the guy that was on Sex and the City. Chris Noth, those two guys own the club. So Steve came up to me and said, hey, are you interested possibly in being in this band Trans-Siberian Orchestra? And I was like, okay. I didn't know what it was. So I was like, yes, because that's my MO. Say yes. Just say yes.
I forgot you did that gig, the Trans-Siberian. Right. Okay.
So I met the people that were like curating vocalists they had multiple bands, some on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. And then they had this New York City rehearsal band that they were looking to fill out, which basically meant you would get together once a week, run all the material for a few hours, and that's it. In case someone on either one of the touring bands gets sick or like, I don't even know, the tour bus falls off a cliff, there's a replacement band ready to go. Like that's how big this organization was. This is insane. So there was a woman playing keys in the rehearsal band that I was in New York named Lucy. And Lucy had been in Moby's band for years. Like she did the whole tour before you, which was Hotel. Is that right? Was that the tour before you? I think it was Hotel. Anyway, so she's a keyboard player in the band. She's friends with this dude, Aaron, who used to be the drummer in Scorpion. He's like a New York, West Village icon dude. He's like an amazing guy. Okay, so he tells her that Moby's looking for singers for a new project. She says to me, I think Moby would like you. Do you have anything I can give this dude, Aaron, to play for him? So I did. Aaron called me up and he was like, yeah, can you meet us at this rehearsal room? So if you're in the East Village, it's like a couple of streets over from Rockwood, there was like a vegan cafe. And then there was like a basement rehearsal studio downstairs that you wouldn't even know was there unless someone told you it was there. Really like old school East Village, grungy, like very cool. Went down in there. Aaron's there. There's a couple of other people in the band. And then Moby shows up. And they were like, great, let's just play something. So I was like, okay. So they start jamming this like bluesy soul rock gritty thing. And they were like, they just look at me and hand me a microphone. So I just start making shit up and just digging into whatever I have, just being like, just like throwing down whatever I can find and just trying to like go with the moment. That was it. And they were like, okay, cool. So can you meet us here next week? We're going to rehearse. We're going to write a bunch of songs and we're going to start this band called The Little Death. And I'm like, okay. Oh my God. And that was, again, one of those moments of like past meeting the present. Of course, I grew up, in the late 90s in high school. Like Moby music was everywhere. It was huge. Now all of a sudden I'm in this fucking rehearsal room with him.
Yeah.
So we do a few things. We did one gig in LA and then I got pulled into another direction with some of my stuff. I ended up going to St. Bart's and doing like touring stuff down there while he was doing other projects. And his project kind of fizzled out, but he asked me to sing on one of his records. So we started doing studio work together. And then just like kind of became friendly. We were hanging out, whatever. And that's basically how that all happened. I could trace it all the way back to like, because I was going to the cutting room, they recommended me for Trans-Siberian. That's how I met Lucy. That's how I got connected with Moby. It's all of it is like from just showing up somewhere. So weird.
And on that, just for anybody who's doing this stuff, I remember you when everybody first moved to New York, and you were like, you hit the ground running. You would get done with a 5-hour wedding or something in New Jersey, and then drive to the West Village at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and just try to go and sit in with everybody.
Yep.
All right. And I remember also, like you were talking about, when you put your name on the list, or when you said you were going to do the Shaka tune, and they kind of gave you that look. You dealt with that look a lot. I remember that look of like, here's this little white girl coming in to these places. In fact, I remember a bass player who will remain nameless, who
I love so much.
Of course,
I just have so much love and respect for him. He was a real teacher. I mean, I learned so much from those dudes.
Of course.
So much.
You remember,
oh my God.
You remember every time you used to walk in?
Come and knock on our door. Yeah, he would make fun of me like Chrissy Snow from Three's Company. And respect. I get it. Like, I looked like I didn't fit in. I fucking needed to prove myself. And nobody, in my opinion, and you and I have talked about this, and I know we think the same, you got to earn your right to be on the stage with the motherfuckers. Like, you have to earn that shit. If they just let any person go up there, it's going to be whack. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I really respect that. So, you know, and it just lit such a fire in me too, to be like, you know, there were so many people on the scene in New York that I was like, I need their approval. I need to work until I get that person's approval. I've told this story to Will Lee a million times. I'm like, I had my sights set on like, I want to prove myself to this monster musician badly. And I'll do whatever I have to do. I'll show up. I'll just keep showing up until I get a chance to say, like, I want to prove myself and I want to be worthy of working with you. And that is the thing that has gotten me to some of the best moments of my life. That's how I ended up working with Nile Rogers. That's how I ended up working with a million people through Will. It's that exact same philosophy. I mean, I live and die by it.
Well, your work ethic has gotten me some of the best experiences of my life, either, because you'd always recommended me for awesome gigs.
I mean, listen, you got the goods, so
you got to ride anybody's coattails. No, but that was amazing. And you mentioned Will Lee, who, like I said, there's so many tributaries we could take because of all the, you know, the way that our careers have gone, and, you know, and different paths and all that stuff. So you did the Moby thing. You did the record. I think that was last night that you were on. You did 2 tracks on that, I remember.
Yep.
And Nile Rogers, you mentioned Nile.
Yeah.
I know we're skipping around chronologically, but how did the Nile Rogers thing happen? Was that another sort of manifestation of I need to get my stuff to him?
Yeah, he's someone that I feel so, I just feel so deeply about. His story is so incredible. Obviously his music, the million pots his musical hand has been in is so incredible. It's so mind-blowing to me. His positive attitude, the way he came through cancer, the way he came through, just he overcomes so much adversity in his life and has created, you know, across styles, just so many different things that it's just like, wow. To this day, I think a lot of people, musicians, yes, but the average person, like, they don't know how deep his shit really runs.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. I mean, if anybody's watching this and is into Nile Rogers, I cannot recommend his biography enough. The one that's written is in his words. It's incredible, his whole story. But he was in my sphere. Like, I was so close to so many different musicians that were working with him. And like I would do club dates with a bunch of people that were in the chic band. And that would tell me like, I want to recommend you to Nile. I'm going to recommend you to Nile. And I was like, yes, amazing. Please do that. And then I would literally, like, if someone told me like, oh, I mentioned you to Nile last night when we were rehearsing, I would tweet at him the next day, because that was the only way I could get
Power of the
it
tweet.
to see if it would click. Oh yeah, that's the chick that someone was just telling me about. Because at that point, I'm just white noise. It's like, okay, how do I, get above that white noise to get into your sphere? I want to work with this person. So multiple people had started kind of recommending me to him. And, I would send these messages, I'd send out a tweet, or I'd retweet what he said. And I was just like, I never wanted to look like over the top, but when I knew that I had been mentioned to him, I'm like, let me follow up this in this way. So one day he tweeted back at me like, oh, I've been hearing great things about you, ! And I was like, oh, motherfucker, this is it. I'm in the door now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now it's registering. And somehow, I'm trying to remember exactly how it was. I just kind of stayed with that tip, and somebody gave him my contact, and he fucking called me on the phone and said, can you be at my home studio today? I got a session. I hear you're great. And I was like, yep. So he sent a car to come pick me up. The car picked me up, drove up to Westport, went to his home, which he has his home studio. It's like a small, very functional, awesome home studio. His engineer was there. It was one of the most, for me, like intense sessions of my life, because he just put me at the microphone, put the track in my ear, and literally was singing the lines to me to sing. So he'd sing me 2 lines, hit record, sing them. No lyric in front of me, no music in front of me, nothing. Just him looking in my face, telling me what to do, and me having to get over my nerves and be like, I'm in the room with Nile fucking Rogers. Oh my God. And just do the job. And it was so great. It went really well. He was so cool. And then afterwards, we went down to his kitchen. He pulled out a bowl of spaghetti and meatballs, and he's like, you want to hear something cool I'm working on? And he played me the whole Daft Punk record before it came out.
Whoa.
I know. He played me that song by Pharrell, Sweat, Lose Yourself to Dance. Remember that one?
Yeah, sure.
He's like, this is the jam. He played it for me. And then it came out like 2 weeks later. So I got to get a preview.
Wow.
Which was such a joy. And then he told me a lot of backstory about his life or whatever. And he paid me like generously, which was so awesome. He's like, oh, I gotta get you to the train. Drove me to the train in
Wow.
this like dope car in Westport. And then tweeted that night, I finally got to do a session with @Chrissi Poland, and she lived up to the reputation. And I was just like, my brain was exploding. I still, to this day, I'm like, did that really happen? Or did I invent that in my head? It's one of those things where I'm like, that's the power of like, just stick with it. Just stick with it.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody just kind of pointed to you where the door was, and you kind of just pounded on it, and then kind of knocked it down as soon as he opened it a crack. So it's not just about having the skills that you have. It was the following up and the relentlessness, really, of setting your sight on somebody and just going like,
yeah, and like knowing how to walk the line between like being appropriate and professional and being too over the top, because nobody wants somebody who's like too over the top. Then it's weird.
Yeah.
And that's a skill in and of itself, learning how to like take a step back, wait, be patient, be a little bit more like, that's hard to figure out. And it's taken me a while to figure that one out too.
People skills is a big one. I mean, you always have been an outgoing person, but yeah, I mean, I can think of a lot of phenomenal players that don't have a lot of personality, or they have certain hangups, and a lot of times they don't work as much because of that. And because talking to people when you're on the road, It's the hang. People talk about the hang sometimes even more than the playing is the hang, because you got to live with somebody for sometimes months at a time. And if they're just a
100%.
drag, then, so yeah, the people skills is huge on top of the musical skills.
It's so huge. In fact, you're so right about that. I cannot even tell you how many times when I've been talking to musicians or people, you know, on tour, or, people who are on tours with people, and it doesn't matter how great you are at whatever your chair is. If you're a dick, that's the first thing people are going to talk about, not your playing. It's
Yep.
the very first thing. And again, there's like, yes, there's a handful of people in this world that are like, okay, there's nobody better. So even though they're a dick, we're going to hire them anyway. But it's so few of those. The rest of all of us are like, sure, you're great at what you do, but if you're a dick, there's somebody else that's great at it too. So we're going to go with the not dick person.
Right.
It's just like always how it goes.
Right.
And I get it. Who wants to be on the road with an asshole? It sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. You're stuck with these people. It's like a job you can't go home from for sometimes months at a time.
No, you got to be a family.
You got to be a family. And on that, as far as the most extensive touring, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was with you with Scissor Sisters, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That was life-changing.
Right. So, okay, how did that one come to be?
So again, it's one of those funny, like, I got a phone call because I was recommended, I believe I was recommended by Naomi Margolin and Nikki Richards, who are both friends. They came up together on Long Island. I've done a million sideband gigs with Nikki. Nikki's a celebrated New York City vocalist, artist in her own right. Has been with Madonna for years, like top call singer, artist. I got a call from Scissor Sisters tour manager saying, we were recommended to you by these people. Can you come into an audition for this band, Scissor Sisters, for a couple of gigs? They want to have a vocalist on a couple of gigs, South by Southwest and like some promo gig in New York. And I was like, Scissor Sisters, wait, is that band? Like, I don't feel like dancing with it. And that was the one hit that I had known. That hit was huge. And so I was like, yeah, sure. What's the date? Okay, cool. And it was at SAR, the audition. And the night before, I had a gig, and I was out till like 2. And it was just like one of those like slogs, and you're exhausted. And I had to be at SAR at like 10 the next morning. I didn't get to bed till like 5 or 6 in the morning because of whatever. And I really didn't want to go. And I almost didn't go. I really almost didn't go. I was like a mess. I was exhausted. Like I looked a mess. I just felt like shit. And my head started getting in the way and going like, you don't even know this band, 2 promo gigs, whatever. Like you don't have to do everything. And I almost didn't go. And I rallied and I went and sung my song, and they asked me who else I had worked with, and, talking about working with people like Moby, who are very much in that Scissor Sisters world of like electronic pop music. They were like, oh, okay, cool. And they saw a handful of people that day, and they called me back like 2 hours later, and they're like, great, you're hired. You got the gig. I was like, oh, okay. So we went to South by, and that was my first time going to South by Southwest. We played at Stubbs. And I don't know what I was expecting. I think maybe I was expecting like a bar gig or something. I don't think I realized the scope of how huge these guys were until we got to South by Southwest, and we walked on that stage, and there were 2,000 screaming people in the audience, like freaking out, losing their minds. And I had not experienced that yet on that level. And I was like, oh my God. And it was profound and amazing. The show was great. It was awesome. Then we did the Bowery Ballroom. And I had never done a show there. Again, like rabid fans, insanely psyched, whatever. Awesome. And that was it. And I thought that was the end of it. And they loved the vibe that me and Bridget Barkin on vocals brought so much that they were like, we're about to do a world tour. Do you want to come with us? And that's when my life changed on so many levels.
Yeah.
And then it was 3 years. I went around the world like 3 times with them. And, those stories are endless, but that was like pivotal, like cornerstone moment in my life.
Yeah. And you did a bunch of TV dates and stuff with them too, right?
Ton of TV here, ton of TV overseas. I mean, everywhere from, all over Europe. Obviously the UK, they're huge in the UK. They had the biggest selling record of, mid 2000s.
You did Glastonbury
Pyramids,
with them, didn't you?
Pyramid Stage, Glastonbury, 80,000 people, like just stuff. I'm still like, I'm pinching myself still.
And didn't you open for Gaga too? Weren't you on tour like with Lady Gaga?
Yeah. So that was like into the second year of me working with them. That was like at the height of Gaga, Monster Ball. And she had come up a Scissor Sisters fan. She came up in the same place as we did, Bitter End, all that stuff. And she was a Scissor Sisters fan because they were, doing things in the Village, doing the shows. And then, she exploded to pop stardom, and she went to them and were like, will you please come and do this tour with me? And they were like, okay, cool. And it was a month tour, US and Canada, the biggest of the biggest arenas. And that's when I found myself standing on stage of fucking Madison Square Garden singing, being like, what, I cannot believe this.
Yeah.
This is the thing. This is the thing that we're all trying to get to. And I don't care what I'm doing. The fact that I'm just standing here doing it, cool. And then I walk off the stage, and the first person I walk into is Paul McCartney when I walk off the stage. Wow. And he picked me up and hugged me.
What?
Yeah.
Jesus, that's crazy. This was at MSG at Madison Square Garden.
So the New York Gaga show, I mean, it was such a who's who backstage. Literally everyone. It was like, oh, there's Katie Couric, there's Liza Minnelli, there's The Edge, there's Bono, there's Bruce Springsteen. It was just everybody. Fine. But walking off the stage and literally coming down the ramp and seeing Paul McCartney standing right there, and we locked eyes, and I couldn't help myself. I just went right over to him and said, can I just thank you? Picked me up, swung me around. You were lovely. You did great. Gave me a white flower. He had a flower in his hand. He just handed it to me.
That's exactly what I would imagine Paul McCartney does. He probably just has pockets full of just white flowers that he just people.
Probably.
That's amazing.
Pretty unreal. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. So,
yeah.
And that's not like the only super huge icon who has embraced you. You also have a Sting story too, didn't you? Didn't you work with Sting as well?
Yes. So this goes back to Obama's inauguration when he first his first term. So it was 2008. What am I thinking? 2008. Yeah. So I was with Sam Moore, who I know you played with also, of Sam and Dave, Soul Stax legend.
You're like the third guy. Now that I think of it, you're the third person who I've had on the podcast that is a Sam Moore.
In the Sam band? That's great.
Tony Lewis, Ivan Bosley.
Oh yeah, and Ivan, yeah. Yeah, so we were, how at the inaugurations, there's like several balls. There's the big one that the president comes and does like their dance at, whatever. But we were at this other one called the Creative Coalition for the Arts Ball. And we were performing with Sam. And there was a bunch of celebrities supposed to be there, and they were all there. And Sting was supposed to be a guest on the show. So we were all at soundcheck waiting for him to show up. Now, I think I had an image in my head of what Sting was going to look like when he walked in. It was going to be like 1986, blonde, sleeves cut off, recognizable Sting.
Furrowed brow.
Totally. Yeah. All of that stuff. and all of a sudden I hear it, like the stage got quiet and everyone was like, and one of the vocalists leaned over to me and were like, oh, he's here. I'm like, what? He's here. What are we talking about? And I'm like, it's literally 6 feet in front of me. He's tiny. I didn't recognize him. I didn't know he was that tiny at the time. He had on a big winter coat, so you couldn't really see much. And he had just a mammoth beard, just you couldn't tell. And it was brown. It wasn't like blondie. It was just brown.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So there he was, plugged in his guitar, and he dialed in his pedals, and it was that Police sound. He got it going like right away, that Sumner's sound that you just know. We rehearsed a bunch of songs. We got to chat backstage. It was so like another one of those, just like, whoa. Yeah. Very cool. Amazing. And I love that he really like bowed down to Sam. He was like, Sam is the icon here, not me, which I thought was really deep and heavy, because he is. Sam is a soul music pioneer, and the Police pulled so much of their music from Black music, soul music, reggae, all that stuff. And he totally 100%. And they acknowledge them so much. And I love that about them.
Absolutely. So, okay, we're ticking off all these incredible names of people. So now you worked with Bette Midler for a little bit, didn't you?
Oh my God, yes. And that
What
was
the
like
hell
my
was
nerd,
that like?
my nerdy child theater self, like in full bloom when that happened.
Sure, the divine
Um,
Miss Midler. Yeah.
it was so crazy. So I think you'll remember this. You remember the gig that we played at the Cutting Room with Genus
Mm-hmm.
and Ray Angry, and was Ryan Bull on that gig on guitar?
Yes, he was Ryan Bull. Yeah, James Genus on bass and Ray
You were
Angry.
playing, and so we did. That was my show. We did my gig, my original music, whatever. It was a great night. It was awesome. Um, and then at like midnight that night after the gig, I don't know where I was. I was like having drinks somewhere with whoever. I get a phone call from an agent that I work with on and off in New York for years saying, "Can you be at an audition tomorrow morning, 8 a.m.? You need a headshot, a resume, a song prepared. It's for Bette Midler." And I was like, I don't have a headshot or a resume on me. I don't have my laptop on me. I don't even know where I was living at that time. I might have been like living out of a storage space. I didn't have access to my stuff easily. Like I was all over the place. Um, oh, you know what? I know where I was. I was staying at Ari's mom's place in the Bronx after my show. So I didn't have all my stuff with me. So I was like, oh my God. So it's already midnight. So, I'm not asleep till 1:30. I get up at 6 a.m. I find some, on their using his mom's computer, I find some like shitty old picture that I had sent to somebody in my email a while ago and a crappy old resume that was bad, like things spelled wrong, terrible. Whatever, slap on a face, slap on some heels, get to Ripley Greer Studios. Or I think it was at Telsey. It was a Telsey casting. So I went in and there was like 100,000 Broadway chicks in there, like a world that I'm not usually in, but a world that I came from when I was a kid. So it was like kind of exciting, but I was like, yeah, right. Okay, whatever. They're looking for like a Broadway hoofer. So fine. So I walk in the room and I sang like Lady Marmalade or something. But the guy sitting behind the desk in the audition was Mark Shaman, who is a celebrated composer. He's a Tony Award winner, Oscar nominee. He wrote Hairspray and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory on Broadway. He's been Bette's musical director for like decades. And years ago, I was called to do a session at his studio, Mark Shaman's studio. And when I walked in, I was like, oh my God, Mark Shaman. Hi, I did a session for you with blah, blah, blah. And your name is on my resume. And he looked and he's like, oh yeah, there I am. So there was that like little connection that I think maybe made me stick in their head a little extra. And I did my song. There was a bunch of choreography rehearsals. It was a callback the next day. They only called back 20 people out of like 150.
And you still hadn't met Bette yet at this point, right?
Nope. And then they kept bringing us in different configurations. They needed 3 harlettes. So they would call me back in with 2 other people, and then I'd wait for an hour and they were trying other people. And then they would call me back in with 2 other people. So they just kept pairing people. And then Bette came in at the very end. They cut it down to 6 or no, it was cut it down to 9. They were looking for 3. So there was like multiple options that Bette could see out of the 9. So we're doing this thing. Bette's at the table, and that's it. She was like, "Thank you guys so much. It was great." And then we left. And then that night, I got the call from the agent. They were like, "They hired you. You're in." And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, this is like shit I used to sing in my hairbrush when I'm like 9. Before I knew shit about music. Before I was just like, whatever musical theater crap I was listening to, and like Bette Midler songs on the radio. That was my world at that point. So she put out a record that was all like 60s go-go throwback songs. And we did all this music. We did a bunch of TV promo. I got to wear like all the big beehive wig and It was a blast. We did the Today Show. We did the Tonight Show. We went to the UK and we did a huge show at the Palladium. It was amazing. And I got to drink champagne with her and hang with her. And one last thing I'll tell you about that, we were rehearsing. She has a rehearsal studio in Harlem, and we were standing around the piano rehearsing the vocals for Wind Beneath My Wings. And I got fucking emotional. Like I got choked up. She was standing right next to me. So it was Bette, me, and the two other ladies. And I had one of those moments where like, this is so heavy. I mean, when I was a kid and I wanted to be her and now I'm with her, it was one of those moments again, where the past meets the present. And you're just like, the musical director like laughed and he was like, you're having a moment where you realize you're singing with Bette Midler, aren't you? And like everybody laughed. I think I kind of made it a joke. It was a little embarrassing and sort of unprofessional, but it just took me over. It's pretty.
It was a human moment. I mean, like you just said, you know, I mean, that's an iconic performer, Bette Midler.
Crazy.
You know, and so, yeah, there have to be those moments where you stop. I remember having a moment on the one gig I did with Sam, where we were playing Soul Man, and there was a screen in front of me where they were showing, you know, everybody playing, and I was and there's my lily white ass playing behind this legendary guy, and I could see the video and thinking like, just you seize that moment, you know.
Yeah, it's heavy.
So, all right, well, on sort of like just the mental game of this thing, I've seen you when you play with these drummers, these monster drummers. You're a leader. You're not just like playing along with them. You lead them. You give direction. You had to do this incredible audition in front of an icon like Bette Midler. All of the having Nile Rogers in your face and just shout. Do you ever get intimidated, and how do you deal with it?
Yes, I definitely get intimidated, and I think what brings me out of it every time is just coming right back in here and going like, just do what you do. Just do what you already know how to do. And you have to kind of shut my brain off from the emotional part of it.
Right.
And like, you know, having that moment where I really got like choked up with Bette Midler, like that's rare. That usually won't happen. I won't let that happen in the moment because it can throw you off. After the fact, you know, I'll have all kinds of moments like that. But in those moments, like getting on stage with someone like Dave, for example, who is so meticulous and is, you know, the best of the best and so precise and has been at it for so long and has no need to deal with any bullshit, anybody wasting his time, anybody not being right on that level. You know, he has no time for that shit. And so that in and of itself can be very like, oh my God, don't fuck up. But if I let go of that crap and just go like, just do what you do. This is what you've been doing. Going to those fucking jams all those years absolutely prepared me for those moments. Yeah. Just to be like, because you have no time to, you know, you got to get up, take the mic and nail it right there. And so doing the jams and going, like you said, I'd go to New York and I would just go to sit in with everybody I want. That was my school. I know we went to Berkeley, but my school was that shit. Because that's what prepared me that when the big gig came, when any of the big gigs came, I was ready. Because you really do. You only have like a little window to really prove yourself, to get someone's attention and be like, okay, they can hang, respect.
Yep.
And that's what I feel like is so vital for, you know, no matter what you're doing. Like if you do that, if you can do that in the first 30 seconds or a minute of being in someone's sphere, I know for me, when someone does that, that's new and I'm like, oh shit, what's up with you? Then I want to be more in that person's sphere. So I think that's how I've been able to kind of manage it and just don't let the mental stuff get in. Just do what you do and let the rest fall where it's going to fall.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Before I let you go, as much fun as I'm having, and we could probably go on for hours and hours.
I know.
I want to talk about what you were doing right before this happened. You were doing some touring and some dates with the one and only Michael Bolton. Yeah.
Totally. And which is another like, I kind of had an idea of like, I have friends in the band, and thought, oh, if they ever needed a vocalist for this band, that would be such a trip, because it's so fun to sing those big belty power songs alongside with a really great singer. And when I realized I could sing like for real, I was about 12. And at that moment, the biggest singers on the radio were Michael Bolton, Celine Dion, and Mariah Carey. That was like the day of like the big power vocalist. So I was like emulating that shit. I had this fucking poster on my wall. I was like,
With the mullet, that
totally.
smoking mullet that you had.
For sure. So when the opportunity came up, I was 2 months out from having my baby. So I had a 2-month-old baby. And then I get this call and I'm like, oh my God, okay. So I talked to Ari about it. And luckily, the first tour that they were doing was only in Florida, and everything was like within a couple of hours drive. So it was in the month of February, which is a very dead month for most touring anyway. So Ari was able to come with me. We all went together as a family. They did their thing, tour bus, whatever vans they were in. Ari and I rented a car. I was in the back seat with the baby the whole time. Ari and I would hang out in the hotel and just hang with our little baby. And then when it was time to go to sound check, I would go to sound check. I'd come back, feed the baby, go back to the theater, do the show, come home to the hotel, feed her whenever the fuck she woke up in the middle of the night, get up, pack it up, go to the next thing. And again, it was just one of those things where it's like, I'm not saying this is for everybody, but like when that opportunities come, if you can try to make it work, because they are few and far between. And luckily, like I had this amazing support with my husband, that we could go together. But doing that with a new baby was tough. It was tricky and it was tough. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity. So we made it work.
Amazing. And then just to be clear, you're not singing just backups. Not that there's just backups, but you're actually singing out front. You're singing the duets with him, and you're even featured for a couple of songs, aren't you? Like he gets off the stage and you take it.
Yeah, it's a very cool chair because I get to come out with him, sing a couple of duet, like the big duets, like How Am I Supposed to Live Without You, which is just such a trip. Cause I remember like, remember this episode of Saved by the Bell when like Jesse and Slater are singing that together, like singing it with him, which is very cool. And it's a great song. It's a great melody. It's a great song to sing. So there's that. David Foster's The Prayer, which is a trip because I sing that song at like weddings, and he features me a lot on that song. And then he leaves and he goes and does a costume change, and I sing like a 3-song medley by myself with this awesome band full of my friends behind me. And then I sing backgrounds for the rest of the gig. And it was great. It's been a great opportunity to do some high level touring again in beautiful rooms, beautiful theaters, with someone again that I came up kind of hearing on the radio and being like, wow, and he slays it. He's in his mid-60s and he's still like slaying it vocally. It's pretty incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So again, there are so many people you've played. Mavis Staples.
So amazing.
Right? Michael McDonald, Billy Gibbons.
So incredible.
All these incredible people that you've gotten to play, sing behind and with. And like I said, we could keep going for another couple hours. I know you have a toddler. But I do want to just say one more, or get your ideas about one other thing. And that is, what are we doing after this whole pandemic nonsense? What are you going to be doing? You have this single, or do you have an EP coming out, or are you just going to keep doing singles? What's your plan?
Yeah. So I have a new EP that's done. It's recorded, and I'll release a few singles from that and then release the EP. I'll probably just kind of roll everything out slowly. So it's a nice kind of content build for the rest of the year. I'm writing a lot more for kind of geared towards sync and licensing music. I have two great companies that I work with in the UK that have done a great job for me with sync and licensing. So had conference calls with them this week about things that they're getting briefs for, more kind of music that they're looking for. And we're really trying to just build up more of our home studio clientele, because as time goes on, I mean, even without the pandemic, we knew you don't want to rely on touring, especially as the years are going on, and if we're having a kid, I don't want to be gone for weeks at a time. So really just kind of working towards building up more of the studio stuff, writing for film and TV, and then writing the stuff that I want to write for me as an artist and releasing it as I go, with the idea that like, okay, these are songs that are going to be able to be utilized through my contacts for placements, licensing, sync, whatever. I just kind of try to keep that machine moving as best as I can. And when we get to play live again, as much of that as I can do, because that's where my joy always has been. Everything else is great in music and I like doing it, but like that's where my happiest place is just on the stage, live music. So however that can keep going, whether it's us playing a little gig at Cisco Brewers in Nantucket, or whether it's, back on stage with Bolton at Royal Albert Hall in the UK, like really miss doing that and can't wait to just do that when we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And St. Bart's, right?
Man, we got to go back.
With
That's a whole other
Jimmy
great
Buffett.
story.
I know it's a
Oh
whole
my God.
Jimmy Buffett story. When you were talking about like freaking out or like the prep stuff and all that stuff, do you remember? I actually have a picture of me like backstage. Will Lee's on bass. We're there for a week. Ryan Perino's on guitar. You're leading the thing, playing keys. People are smoking cigarettes right in our fight, right? Total
Oh my
mayhem,
God.
but the greatest party and a good time. And Jimmy Buffett shows up and is like, "Can I sit in with y'all?" No, what are we gonna say? No, right? So and we were like backstage trying to like shed all the what do you want to do? How's that one go? What keys it in and all this? And I remember at one point looking at you like, what's going on? And you're like, dude, you're a professional musician. Like you can hang with this. Just pull it together. And I was like, oh yeah, thanks for talking about it. I got a great video off of it, and you're all leading the band, and there's Jimmy.
I love that video. Oh man, that video is fantastic. And it
Got to
really
play
shows like
Margaritaville, yeah, with the dude.
that was such a trip. What a good time.
What were you gonna say? It really shows what?
It just really shows, that video that you have really shows the the intensity of like that gig at the Baz Bar, where especially during that week, the bucket week, when all the people, there's like 1 billion people there racing their boats or whatever. And talk about challenging performing situations. You and I have done the best of the gigs and the worst of the gigs, and this is one of those gigs. It's like all the best of the good stuff and then really tough technical situations. So it's so fun. Jimmy Buffett's sitting in, David Letterman showing up, and people are loving it. They're having so much fun, but they're like, literally, like you said, they're on top of us. I mean, bumping into you. I think I got whacked in the face with the microphone like 20 times that week.
Yes, by that lovely fan that just couldn't stop making requests drunkenly and as obnoxiously as he can.
I know, blowing cigarette smoke.
You gotta play.
Oh my God. How many stories do we have of that? We have to do a whole other chat someday about just like, let's like one for one with the worst gigs ever and just start going back and forth.
Yeah.
So many stories.
Well, that was a fun gig, but that particular,
that was great.
That part of it is not when they're blowing cigarette smoke in your face and they're literally like changing the presets on your keyboard when they get too drunk, But
oh man,
but yeah.
Remember the keyboard? Actually, someone knocked it over.
Yes, yeah.
And the owner, our friend John Mark, was so pissed, rightfully so. But yeah, they were getting out of control that week.
But it was great. But again, like you're talking about, like sink or swim. You're having this craziness and people up in your face, and then in walks Jimmy Buffett, and you got to play whatever Jimmy Buffett wants to play, and then Jimmy leaves. But and through it all, with you and I doing this stuff, and then I look to my left, and who's on bass, but like one of the biggest bass players of all time with like this insane resume, and he is bringing it, man. Like every night, he's not like sitting
100%.
there going, oh man, I can't wait to go back to the hotel. And Will Lee is like every night preparing charts, slaying it out in front of people. And that is why, that's one of the reasons he's a legend.
That's
And
why he is what he is. It's so true, man. Like when I first asked him to do that gig, I was like, why would he ever want to do this little gig when he is who he is? And he was like, yeah, definitely, I'll do it. Okay, great. He comes down and yeah, I mean, he brings it every night, same level as if he was on stage, with George Harrison, like he's done, same level as when he's been on that Letterman stage at Sullivan Theater, 35 years. He brought it every night. He's so pro, and it just makes all of us better when we play with him.
yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, yeah, like I said, we can go on and on and on, but it's easy. It's easy to talk to you. Just let you go and just talk about your experiences and your approach and your perspective, which is totally unique as somebody who has done all the work you have and has worked with all the drummers that you have worked with. I could go on and on, but I think I'm going to let you go. Thank you so
All
much for
right.
doing this. I can't thank you
Oh
enough.
man, I'm so glad you're doing this. This is awesome. And I love that it's getting traction, and I'm glad I could be a part of it. I love you.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. And I can't wait until we can all hang out and play music again. And like you mentioned, Cisco Brewery and all those fun gigs and stuff like that. And
Totally.
okay, so just one more time, Down With Me is the name of the single. The video is out. It's happening. Where can people find you? Let us know.
You can find me on my website, just chrissypoland.com, and then all the social media platforms, just my name, Chrissi Poland. The song's on all the streaming platforms. You can download it on Bandcamp if you want it, and the video is up on YouTube.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chrissi.
Thank
And I look
you.
forward to hanging with you again soon. Tell Ari
Me
I said
too.
hello.
I will. All right,
Right.
I'll see you soon.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.